Hey guys, Saint here. There was recently a video, I don't know if you guys have seen it yet, of a police officer who took down a high school student. I guess she was a black female, and so I'll show you the video if you haven't seen it, and then we'll get into a little more on it. Here we go. Okay, I'll play it once more. Um, Also, you notice how the video doesn't fit the whole screen. It's because people don't know how to hold their phones properly. But here you go. Play it once more. So the officer has apparently he's arresting her and he's told her to move. She was called, she was being disruptive. And so she was ultimately resisting arrest. Um, so what does that, I mean, that seems like a pretty intense response. I saw people on the news talking about how that is unacceptable in any case, and no parent, no teacher or parent, student, no decent human being would think that that was appropriate. Well, I think that you should listen to the cops when they tell you to do stuff. I don't think we've seen yet we've seen some of it, and they've been dealt with, but a lot of these cases where you say, oh, it's the police, they're being brutal on people because of their race and stuff like that. Well, in most of those cases, Freddie Gray, that big dude up in New York, the Ferguson guy, I don't even remember any of these guys' names. Anyway, all of them were resisting arrest or even turned around to assault a police officer instead of just doing what they were supposed to do, instead of following the rules. So, oh, well, you say, Saint, these people, it's easy for you to say because we don't know what you are. But obviously you're not black, because if you were, then you would realize that this is an issue. It's racism, just deeply ingrained in our culture. Maybe so, maybe not. I think what it really comes down to is it comes down to psychology. And I love psychology, I love sociology, philosophy, all that kind of stuff. So I want to introduce you to something called vivid cases. So there was this thing, and it says, or quoting, in judging other groups, we often overgeneralize from vivid, memorable cases. This comes down from a study that was done, and there were two groups shown information about 50 men. The first group, 10 were shown information about men doing nonviolent crimes. The second group was later shown 10 men who did violent crimes. Later, when both groups recalled how many men on their list had committed any sort of crime, the second group overestimated that number. Vivid violent cases come readily to mind and therefore influence our judgments of a group. That was from David Myers, Exploring Psychology. So what does that mean? How does that apply to us? Well, I think if we look at the number of Muslims in the world, I think there's over 1 billion of them, 1/6 of the population. Then we look at all the ones that are committing terroristic acts. Well, okay, and this brings up a whole nother topic, but we'll maybe address that later on. The reality is, not all 1 billion of those people are committing terroristic acts. But if you hear an issue of terrorism, you're probably going to think that it's going to happen with a Muslim. Is that racism? Is that bias? No, I think it's because of vivid cases. We overgeneralize from vivid, memorable cases. It just makes sense that that's what we see because, oh, terror, 911, whatever. It's happening with Muslims doing that. Now there gets into issues of jihads and stuff like that, and we're not going to get into that right now. But I think that's just a very important thing. So we tend to think that, and so we hear about all these cases where cops have shot young black. I think most of them, all of them, are men. So then we look for what we call a confirmation bias. Myers again. Quote, "We seek evidence verifying our ideas more eagerly than we seek evidence that might refute them." And then Francis Bacon, which is awesome last name by the way, says, quote, "The human understanding, when any proposition has been made once laid down, forces everything else to add support and confirmation." So those are two issues of confirmation bias. So we get these vivid cases that come in there, and in our mind we're seeing violence against blacks, violence against minorities. Then we get confirmation bias. We start to look for cases where that happens instead of looking at the actual issues. She was resisting arrest. She was not following his thing. One of the things that really bothers me when we look at Freddie Gray, when we look at, I totally forgot the dude's name in Ferguson. When we look at him, we're not looking at the innocent people who are going and being beaten. There is a such thing as police brutality. There are issues where cops can take advantage of the authority we've given them and abuse it and abuse other people. But in the cases that are being sensationalized, we're not getting that. We're not getting the innocent people. We're getting people who are doing what is wrong. And then they resist arrest. And I can tell you, just based on basic psychology, that creates a confirmation bias in the cops as well. It creates vivid cases in the cops to where they're going to say, okay, look, this is a black male. He's going to have an issue with me. Is he going to try to shoot me? Is he going to do this and that? And it ends up hurting people. And it's creating this spiral cycle that's negative. So what else can be said about this? Well, I think the answer, and remember that I'm a Christian, can come in two different places. 1 Peter 2:13-17 says, "For the Lord's sake, submit to all human authority, whether the kings as head of state or the officials he has appointed. For the king has set them to punish those who do wrong and to honor those who do right. It is God's will that you live honorable lives, that your honorable lives should silence those ignorant people who make foolish accusations against you. For you are free, you are God's slaves, and don't use your freedom as an excuse to do evil. Respect everyone, love the family of believers, fear God, and respect the king." So this was written by Peter, one of the apostles of Jesus, someone who sat under Jesus and was taught directly by him. We're not going to get to the fact of God's slaves. That's more of an idiom that Peter was talking about, and more of a cultural thing. What the big thing is here is the fact that it says, in verse 15, "It is God's will that you should live honorable lives, that your honorable life should silence those ignorant people who make foolish accusations against you." So in the case of, with the whole racist cop things, if you've got people and you've got cops who are racist and who are expecting and looking for young black men and young black women to do things that are wrong, and they're just waiting every moment for you to do that, and then they're going to pounce on you and they're going to abuse you and take things of that, I would say that's an ignorant person who makes foolish accusations, because the color of someone's skin does not determine whether or not they do something right or wrong. They're not any more predestined to do that. What it is it's the fact that we live in a culture, and then people buy into these things. They look for confirmation bias. They have the vivid things happen, and then they're just like, oh, well, this is going to happen. But so what Peter's writing here is that we need to do that which is right, and by living honorable lives, we show them that their accusations are foolish. And in the same way, if there is widespread issues where there's abuse done by police officers and stuff like that against particular races or genders or whatever, then they need to be living way above board to ensure that when that does happen, they can point it out and everyone will rally around them. It only makes sense. And so then you get to, because when it comes down to it, civil disobedience is something that society accepts. We use it to show the unfairness in laws and rules. And Martin Luther King Jr. and many civil rights activists in the 1960s did that. They would disobey police officers to show how unjust the institutionalized racism was. And then when they were taken to jail, they were legitimate martyrs. The problem that we go into is that, as I mentioned before, these people aren't innocent who are being made the not social justice, but the who are being made into martyrs. They're not people that you can look up to and say, you know what, these people were genuinely wrong and these people were genuinely hurt. And if it is institutionalized racism and the people aren't accepting it, it's because, like, well, that guy deserved it. He was resisting arrest. Is that true? There may be cases where it's not true. But we don't know because the other person who is at fault, i.e. the person who was resisting arrest, isn't working to do it. They aren't really participating in civil disobedience. The other problem is a lot of these people may be purposely disobeying because they think they are being civilly disobedient, right? The problem is there are consequences to civil disobedience. Some people were jailed. Some people had other stuff happen. And we have to be prepared for that, right? So we can't instantly expect to be made a martyr and to be able to civilly disobey people and then not have any kind of problems, right? And it may seem like I'm slightly contradicting myself or whatever, but I'm not really, only because in many of these situations you can be civilly disobedient without provoking or being antagonistic, or even in some cases, like the guy in Ferguson, Michael Brown, where you're assaulting the police officer, right? There's a slight difference. And I think also when I use the term resisting arrest, there's a difference between, like in the video that we saw where she's like punching him and stuff like that versus just sitting there, you know, hey, I'm going to do what I'm just going to follow it, right? So anyway, there's another verse, Romans 13:1-5. It says, everyone must submit to governing authorities, for all authorities comes from God, and those in positions of authority have been placed there by God. So anyone who rebels against authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and they will be punished. For authorities do not strike fear in people who are doing right, but in those who are doing wrong. Would you like to live without the fear of the authorities? Do what is right, and they will honor you. The authorities are God's servants, sent for your good, but if you are doing wrong, of course you should be afraid, for they have the power to punish you. They are God's servants sent for the very purpose of punishing those who do what is wrong. So you must submit to them not only to avoid punishment, but also to keep a clear conscience. So let's take out the issue that they were set up by God. You know, we would live in a culture of a social contract that has been placed. We like it when the police protect us, and we agree to follow the laws of this nation in order to not be social outcasts. That's what the whole idea of a social contract that Jean-Jacques Rousseau, however you pronounce his name, set up or talked about. And let's take out the idea of God and just look at verse 3. For the authorities do not strike fear in people who are doing what is right, but in those who are doing what is wrong. Would you like to live life without fear of the authorities? Do what is right, and they will honor you. You know, I know people of all different colors, races, sexes, everything, who don't like police officers. And they don't like them for a myriad of different reasons. And consequently, all of them have had issues with the police. Now, there are other people who I know who don't have an issue with police officers. They respect them. They are nothing but nice to them and polite and stuff like that. And they're not treated weird or anything like that. They're treated totally normal. And what I think it comes down to is the fact that they create a self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, so based on the vivid issues, based on confirmation bias, they get a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, all this cop's going to do is he's just going to do this. Well, then you subconsciously may not realize it, but you're going to be more on the defensive. You're going to be more aggressive in the way that you deal with the person, even if you don't realize it. And I think that creates, like I said, the self-fulfilling prophecy. So let's watch the video again, and let's take into account some things that may have happened. She's been, at this point, she's been arrested. She said, okay, you've been arrested. You got to come with me. So she is resisting. She's not meaning to get up. So, okay, well, now she's being she's being civilly disobedient. Well, you could say that, except for the fact that right about here, puts her in the headlock, she starts hitting him in the face. And she's still resisting, and then he overdoes it. Maybe. I don't know. I'm not a police officer, so I can't tell you for sure what they're supposed to do. It looks like it's not something they're supposed to do. I don't think that her race, her gender, or the fact that she's in high school should have any bearing on what happens. Anyway, if you like what you heard, that's cool. I did it in one take. Woohoo! So you probably see some mistakes in there. Like, subscribe, comment. If I need to, I can clarify my point about civil disobedience versus doing what's right and not getting any kind of penalties and stuff like that. But I think it's pretty clear, when you're being civilly disobedient, you can stand up to the wrong and the injustice and everything without necessarily fighting back, i.e., oh, well, okay, you need to move out of here because you're not supposed to sit right in this area. Well, I'm going to continue sitting here. Okay, then I'm going to arrest you. Okay, officer, you may arrest me. That's not what's, you don't have to fight against them. You don't have to just yell, I'm not resisting arrest, when you're obviously resisting arrest, right? It's I don't know. Anyway, like I said, if you enjoyed, comment, subscribe, let me know, like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. We'll talk about some stuff. It'll be all good. So, until next time, I'm Saint, signing off. Remember, all will be well.